Also, Asia is home to majority of indigenous peoples worldwide. Five of the most diverse countries are in the region: China, India, Indonesia, the Philippines, and Malaysia. And of course, aside from these natural resources, we also boast of several cultural and heritage sites in the region. And these natural ecosystems and biodiversity provide the means of survival. And it also defines the way of life of at least 4.6 billion peoples, of course, making Asia the most populous in the world. And in the region alone, we have around 2,000, more than 2,000 spoken languages. The region, as I've mentioned, is rich in forests, minerals, waters, and agricultural land. In fact, our climate is quite different compared to other regions, and it's probably the only region that is suitable for rice production. And rice is one of Asia's most important agricultural commodity. And in fact, it's a primary staple of the food staple of the continent. We cannot survive without our rice, probably second to chili, if I'm not wrong. So this natural, cultural, and human resources is the core of the conflict in the region, because it is these resources that foreign and local capitalists and state-owned corporations extract or grab for profit, often in the name of development. So we have dams and energy projects, large-scale and commercial mining, agribusiness and monocrop plantations, infrastructure, and tourism, similar to what is happening in Tanzania. And the conflict over these resources is on ownership, it's on use, it's on management, and often the implementation of all of these projects and even policies lead to the displacement of indigenous and rural communities from their lands. And this also leads to human rights abuses like disappearances, extrajudicial killings, and criminalization of leaders, members of people's organizations or communities, or anybody opposing these projects. And more often than not, the government would deploy military forces to communities to silence opposition to these projects. And of course, we all know that the various human rights monitors evidence this claim. What is also particular in Asia is that we find the most despotic and corrupt leaders in the region. We have the military junta in Burma, the son and daughter of former fascist dictators Marcos and Duterte are the incoming president and vice president in the Philippines. We have Jokowi of Indonesia, which has a policy of a brutal policy in relation to West Papua. We have Modi of India. And of course, with that, we would expect an intensification of attacks in the region, and especially since governments in Asia have also enacted or revised their existing national security laws within the framework of anti-terrorism or counter-terrorism. And common in these legislations is the expanded and vague definition of what is terrorism or acts of terrorism, and they encroach on internally recognized civil liberties like being held in jail without charges. In my country, in the Philippines, in the last 5 days, we have experienced the tip of the brutality of the incoming new regime. On June 7, the police violently arrested 92 farmers and their advocates, including journalists, for engaging in a collective cultivation activity, which we call bungkalan, in lands that government awarded to farmer beneficiaries of agrarian reform. So the police detained these 93 in a 3 by 3 feet by 3 feet or probably a little bigger detention cell for fabricated crimes of malicious mischief and illegal assembly. They are now on bail because through their lawyer, they were able to post bail amounting to 1.2 million pesos. In another incident, just 2 days ago, the police again arrested a 69-year-old woman, environment and indigenous peoples advocate, for simply distributing leaflets explaining the harmful and environmental impacts of a state-sponsored dam project. She remains in jail for rebellion charges. So with all of this, again, we expect an intensification of attacks against human rights, against the environment and land defenders, against social movements, as people would protest neoliberal economic policies and foreign dictates and fight the corrupt bureaucracy that brings poverty and climate destruction. We all know and we have seen that poverty and tyranny would breed dissent. I mean, let's take a look at Sri Lanka. I mean, people are in the streets, no, demanding for food. They are demanding for change in government in a situation wherein their government is bankrupt. And especially we have, I mean, if even their foreign debt is so high. So in a situation like this, what should we do? I mean, is there hope? What is lacking? What is lacking in what we are doing? I think for one, we should never lose hope, you know. And we have done different forms of action, but I think we still have to do much more. One, indigenous peoples have used traditional ceremonies. Farmers have rehabilitated degraded areas for agricultural production. The youth have taken on social media for visibility campaigns and protests, despite repression. And even in the time of pandemic, we were able to assert all of this. I think we should be able to continue that. Two, meta-legal actions such as barricades against mining companies or even dam projects are also ongoing. And our campaigns led to the denial of permits and the stoppage of certain operations. And we have also fought, number three, we have also fought and won several legal cases. So what is important in all of these three aspects that I've mentioned? I think it is very important, the issue of unity and being able to broaden our ranks, to be able to pressure governments as duty bearers to improve the environmental situation and its defenders. And we should be able, coming from our unity and strength, be able to seek accountability for every human rights violation. We should demand that government uphold and implement human rights standards, especially such as the 1998 UN Declaration on Human Rights Defenders and the Human Rights Council Resolution 40-11 on environmental human rights defenders. If there are none, governments should be able to domesticate these international standards and create mechanisms for investigation, monitoring, and reparation. If possible, we should still call on government to review laws that allow these destructive projects and strengthen regulations along human rights and environmental protection. However, I think there is still a need to enhance our capacity, the need of defenders, our organizations, our communities, our alliances, to enhance our capacity for documentation work and address the challenges of timely and proper recording, reporting, and monitoring incidents of violations. More often than not, it is our reporting is sometimes quite late, no? And six, I think we must further with this enhanced documentation capacity. We must further engage. We should be able to engage national, regional, and international human rights mechanisms for them to assist in justice for victims of environmental and human rights violations. I think I would be happy to hear from our comrades, from our colleagues from Latin America and Caribbean on their experience in the drafting, passing, and implementing the Escazú Agreement. Is it possible? Maybe in Asia, let us ask ourselves, is it possible to push for an Asian version of this agreement? Now we also see a strengthening of international solidarity, not only with international institutions, but also among organizations of environmental defenders. So I think with the continued action of grassroots communities, national movements, people's movements, and international solidarity, this would bring hope, and sources of inspiration. Now, historically, I'm coming to my last 2 points. Historically, through painstaking and building of local and community organizations, the people's movements, it is collective action that still remains to be the most potent force to address the issue of human rights violations, to uproot dictators, to uproot corrupt bureaucrats, and bring form genuine pro-people leaders, programs, policies, and reforms. Because we know that change do not simply drop from the sky. No, change is not handed to us in a silver platter. It is something that we have to fight for. So in this period of disinformation, in this period of false and fake news, let us also take time to study not only the current events, but also our history. Let us learn from our history. Let us look into the bravery and heroism of indigenous peoples, our ancestors, and others who have gone ahead of us in service to the people, and we should be able to get inspiration from them. Their legacy should not and should never be forgotten, but lived by the present generation and passed on to the next generations. So I think under a continuing climate of human rights violation and foreign dictates, imperially sponsored violence, the task to arouse, mobilize, and organize becomes more urgent.